Yes, just to add to that, I mean, I disagree. I think the Liberty do a very bad job in standing up for rights. I think they do a very bad job in using the word liberty quite a lot of the time. People can't help noticing that, for instance, you mentioned their attitude toward control and extradition. I find it absolutely perverse that Liberty or any organisation would bother to spend as much time as they do, for instance, stopping Abu Qatada from expedition to Jordan, because he might be tortured there. Now we have an agreement with Jordan that that would not happen. Abu Qatada, among other things, taken Britain to the European Court of Human Rights, and he wants £1,000 damages for the unhappiness he's had to suffer in being in Belmarsh prison. I don't care how happy he is in Belmarsh. And this comes back to the point you make. What we have seen in recent years has been a wide and wild expansion of the state's interest in criminality, including things like, as Alex has said, criminalising motorists because you can't get real criminals. And one of the results in this is that people have, I think, less faith in the justice system than they did, and they have less faith in the democracy than they did. There is a solution to this, and I look, as very often I do, to America, and I would see there that we have what I would argue, a much better and fairer society, one in which you have more freedom to muck up, and when you muck up badly, you will be punished to a greater extent than you can be here. As I say, just finding on that, it strikes me as being, when the case I gave Abu Qatada, the trickle-down effect things like that have on our general sense of justice in the country, and our general sense of fairness, is immeasurable. And it comes back to this thing, the government and others unwilling to identify an enemy, and if you're part of that enemy, if you have association with that enemy, if you spend your time hanging around with that enemy, you're going to have to suffer the fact.
We disagree. The lady in the middle. Your question, Paul?
Well, I guess I was wondering what you think. You talked about legislation, and I was wondering what you think the solution is to the fact that a lot of the infringements on our civil liberties actually don't come from legislation, they come from sort of technical change of method or upgrading of the way in which it's possible to carry out surveillance. The DNA database, there's no law to bring that in.
No.
And things like CCTV microphones, there probably won't be a law to say that that's okay. So I was wondering how you transfer things from a sort of, where it's perceived to be about method, but how you transfer that sense of actually being about legislation.
Yes. This government's been one of the worst offenders of ramming through substantive change through statutory instruments. It's one of the unspoken scandals of the last decade that it's done that. And I firmly believe that the next government, I hope to heaven it's a Conservative one, ought to commit itself to bring any question of incursion of civil liberties to the floor of the House. That is an open issue on which, if there is any doubt that that applies or not, you can take it to debate in the House and win or lose on the merits in an argument with the people who have been elected by us to choose for us in these circumstances. And I think that's a very easy way to resolve the issue that you identify.
Yeah, I just add, I mean, Alex said the advantage of being a lawyer, right? I think I'm the only person employed in London who isn't a lawyer. But you might be on the technicality. I mentioned the following in terms of the legislation in the House, which is this. And Frank Field said some months ago now, a very striking thing he wrote. He said the guilty secret of the House of Commons now is that nothing is being done. There is no legislative agenda. MPs turn up with literally nothing to do. The Conservatives cannot be utterly blameless in this, and they have a duty to do better than they've done in opposition when they're in government, in looking seriously at these things again. As I say, I wish I saw the willingness to do so.
So, right, right. Sure.
Just thinking in terms of religious incitement, recently, if you look at a recent example, there's a hotelier or to dispute with their residents over religious debate.
Yes.
So that's one example where the police decided to prosecute the incitement. Yet if you look at programs like the Rocks, for example, where you have people beheading, not actually beheading, inciting
Well, my answer is you were very kind to the audience. There were lots of raised eyebrows when I questioned the police, which is always a difficult thing to do as a conservative. If people think about this rationally, when a traveller breaks a story, celebrity X is being charged with offence Y at police station Z. Do you think they got that from hard Fleet Street investigative journalism? No, they didn't. They got it because a desk sergeant rang up his friend at the newspaper. The police leak like sieves, and that's just the lowest example of how our police, who we entrust with things like our privacy and involved in the war, misbehave all the time. On the flip side, on the much more serious level, is this, where the police are in effect making policy decisions about our culture and our way of life. They were much more reluctant to prosecute outright incitement to murder in a mosque, and much more likely to prosecute a Christian for handing out leaflets in the street which mention homosexuality. That is a dichotomy that I'm unhappy with the police being in the power to decide about. Now, if our country had a big referendum that said, yep, that's how we ought to be, I would be profoundly unhappy to be British, but we would be in a much more comfortable situation democratically. But at the moment, we just let the police do that, another branch of the executive. And with that, I'm completely unhappy.
I just comment that I actually once spoke with one of the Westminster police who refused to prosecute undercover mosques. And I asked him why they hadn't. I said, is it of no concern to you if you go in in your area called the murder of Jews and homosexuals? He said, what you have to understand, Mr. Murray, is that this is a very multiracial area, very multicultural. I said, multiculturalism extends to a monoculture, which believes in the murder of minorities. He said that it would cause possible unrest. It was more problematic to him that a Jew would complain about the imam threatening him with being killed, than it was that imam should be arrested for doing that. This is simply one example of the following, which is, as I say, we live in a society in which young people in particular talk an extraordinary language of rights, and seem to my mind to have no idea what the actual fundamental rights are, or where they come from, how we attain them, and how we're losing them. And on the issue of freedom of speech, an absolutely prime example. I find it exceedingly hard, going around the country speaking, often to young audiences, I find it exceedingly hard to get through to them the fact that because something is nasty, short of incitement, if something is nasty, even wrong, you cannot ban it simply because you think it nasty or wrong. And yet I see people who think they know all of their rights, with no understanding of the most fundamental right called the right to freedom of speech. And as I don't know how this will change other than by some kind of example. I don't need to tell you that we live in a culture, I agree with Alex on this one, we live in a culture in which the sculpture Piss Christ can be exhibited with taxpayer money, and I just want to see the same thing with a sculpture called Fuck Muhammad.
Yes. I think we've drawn to a close now.
I always like when the room gets slightly sweaty and silent when they say that.
No, I just looked at the time. It's actually I was in chambers with the part-time judge who sat on the case in which she convicted the woman reading out a list of names on her own quietly outside Downing Street, a list of dead people. I felt that was quite profoundly wrong. And it's when you can get into a situation in which the person that I knew, objectively thoroughly pleasant, objectively not stupid, could make such a decision. And that's when we've got things in this country structurally, legally, and in a lot of ways culturally, quite so wrong. That's the most extreme form of repression, of the most mild exercise of freedom of speech. That's where I think we really ought to question the sort of society we live in. And on that slightly moralising note, I say thank you very much to my guest, Douglas Murray. I thank you very much indeed for your questions, and enjoy the rest of the conference.